thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Really, thanks to you and Robin for putting this all together. I know you watch our podcast every time we put a new one up. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
And it is heavily viewed. Like we're into the millions a month now. So don't worry about that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I always say it's getting old, that joke, guys. We need a new joke.
We agree.
Yeah,
Everyone agrees.
Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com. Episode 59, I believe. Who do we have?
Robin Kroll.
Chris O'Neill.
Ben Pugsley.
Jason Kahn.
Awesome. Welcome, Jason.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. It's been a while since we've been able to meet up at a trade show or shake a hand, obviously, but it's really good to see you. For those of us that are watching this on YouTube, it's nice to be able to see everyone's face again, and hopefully be able to shake a hand. I don't know. Will we ever be able to shake hands again, Jason? I don't know.
I think so.
That's kind of weird. Oh, we will be able to? Okay, good. Whew.
Right.
Like a little elbow or something. But yes, thanks for joining us. We've got a lot to discuss about your role, your area in the insurance industry in Canada, specifically with Wawanesa. So we're super pumped about that. Just kicking it off, why don't you give us a quick overview of your role and how Wawanesa is addressing kind of the broker network right now?
Yeah, for sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Jason Kahn. I'm Director of Innovation with Wawanesa Mutual. My team is part of the digital office at Wawanesa. So we have very much a kind of a digital and experience focus. Our team's focus is more about the future. If you kind of want to think about like where we fit in, we think about the near future and the far future in different ways. The near future being how do we make what we do better for customers and for brokers, and in the far future, we're really thinking about the disruptive trends and technologies that could reshape the way that consumers either interact with us or the nature of risk that we underwrite as well. So we kind of play in both those spaces, and we run kind of experimental projects, if you will, to be able to validate and learn kind of our assumptions about what the future could look like, and also to learn more about what customers' real needs are with respect to kind of experience and insurance needs.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the only time that I think it's valid to sort of, when you interview someone, to say, we're essentially a time machine. You're being hired into a time machine. That sounds so cool. Like to be in an environment where you can, like you said, you sort of run your own tests all day about the future. It's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what's that?
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. It's the crystal ball that people are looking for, and no one has one. So this is what we're looking for is hopefully, a defensible way to think about the future in a rational way.
Yeah, 100%. So, why is this so important to, I guess, Wawanesa and their customers, the work that you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're inextricably kind of connected to our broker partners, so it's important to us and the relationships we have with them, and to our customers. I mean, insurance is about the future, and it's about a promise to keep for the future. And it's important that we have a business that's resilient and sustainable in the long term. So it's absolutely just from the fundamentals of insurance, it's important for us to be thinking about that way. Notwithstanding that, like any good business, it's also just relevant for us to be thinking about the long-term sustainability of our business model. And, especially today, when you think about the impact of technology on the nature of risk, especially, for example, if we were to pull on the thread of auto insurance for a second, and just think about the number of different technological changes that are happening in the auto space today. whether it be electrical vehicles, telematics, autonomous vehicles, ride sharing. There's a list of probably 7 or 8 really kind of, I would call them mega trends related to auto insurance. And they have a material impact on, first of all, the level of risk that we're underwriting, but also the experience. And it's really important for us to be aware of that and to be able to calibrate ourselves as an organization towards that future. Hard to do when you have that many kind of concurrent trends all kind of conspiring at the same time. And that's where the research piece comes in.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not just, that's concurrent even within one kind of product line, right? If you will, like I'm sure you look at in a megatrend lens, there's other big ones that are emerging as well. Like how does the gig economy play into anything that you're working on?
Well, it is. It's not an active area of research for us today, like right now at this moment. So I wouldn't, comment too deeply on it, but it absolutely is. It's a trend, and you could think of it affecting things like, employee benefits perhaps, and life insurance as well on that side of the business too.
Like I know through the pandemic, and not to date this podcast, it'll ultimately always need to be, but we've had, like say for example, my son's jujitsu gym, and they can't operate, right? So the founder of that gym, the professor, he's had to take on a couple of other, really gig economy type roles, whether it's the grocery pickup service or delivery service. And, sometimes I think honestly, it's like 2 or 3 at a time, which I think probably to your point earlier affects both the auto side of that equation, as well as just himself as a employee, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
That's very cool.
I had a quick question in that. How do you balance, and maybe we're going to get into this with the other question, but how do you balance with the broker channel those big idea innovations, those mega trends with kind of the everyday digital marketing trends that are kind of more where we're at today, whether it's, paid advertising or email marketing or social media that's kind of falling still within the existing sales process and existing service timeline that we've all had for years upon years in the insurance brokerage world.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. And the way to look at that is that we're operating on different time horizons concurrently. So
right.
I know I kind of blasted open by talking about some like really far future trends, but at the same time, we have very active exploration work being done on very near-term needs as well. So for example, our analytics team is experimenting with the use of machine learning models to help with predictive analytics, which is around kind of near-term marketing, right? To help with more targeted marketing and more profitable marketing. So that would be an example of something that's being done that has a more short-term application. So our portfolio of explorations is really made up of like a grouping of projects across different time horizons. And I would say that a lot of it's very weighted towards, the now, you would say, and kind of increasingly, it looks more and more research focused the further out you get into the future.
Cool. I think that's a pretty big value though, to have a team that is focused, that is focused on all the areas and not just kind of in one lens. And so I think that it's kind of like the DeLorean, I guess, time machine, back to the time machine, that you are able to go into all of these, relevant areas, whether it's future or current. So that's pretty good.
And it's very important and helpful. Because like most companies, they get really good at operating the business. And they're, generally teams are incentivized to operate the business and fly by that wire. And it's helpful to have people thinking about kind of outside that box as well. Otherwise, time can go by very quickly in the world.
Yeah.
Like Ferris Bueller says,
Yes.
Time can go by really fast.
Yeah.
I just watched that movie the other day, actually.
That's an awesome movie.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to stop. Life can
Let
You
them
don't.
come by. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you don't stop and look around a little bit.
Mhm.
But I think maybe you could touch on, because to the point that you guys are just making on that value back to your constituents, to the broker network. I think that's probably helpful for them at times too, to sort of say, well, I'm in the present, like a lot of your time horizon stuff is like, okay, it's in the present, but when should I start to think about these other things? When is it concerning for me to worry about this? Like, because I can see many of us get wrapped up in the hype cycle, right? And it's like, well, we don't have to worry about that yet. I mean, we're thinking about it, and you should be to some degree, but this is a trend that is maybe 6 or 12 months out. Do you have those types of conversations with?
To some extent, I mean, they're probably more practical conversations these days. They're more focused on the here and now and kind of the needs of our, but yeah, I would say so. I mean,
Yeah.
what we tend to do is we'll collaborate with our broker partners, especially on research. So that, I mean, hopefully, they find that helpful, and they find the insights helpful. And then on kind of shorter term initiatives, they're more project focused. That's where we actually just do stuff together. And that's quite practical in nature. I mean, usually it's delivering a marketing campaign, for example.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a good segue into, we'll get down into the marketing here in a moment, but are there other, maybe just to touch on the industry for a little bit here, other big sort of challenges that you see right now for, the insurance market in Canada? You see just kind of putting pressure on everybody, or making it a challenging environment, let's say.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, my lens, I'm going to speak maybe from a digital perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's probably because that's where my experience comes from. And I do understand that there are other challenging areas as well of the business, but I can maybe speak from what I know, right? So, I mean, one of the challenges there is the impact of digital on broker distribution and distribution in general. And it's just a very interesting time. Like, I'm watching the skills and talent that the brokers are developing in-house to be able to keep up with the ecosystem that they're marketing into. I mean, managing Google, if you want to say that, is like almost a full-time job now. And if a broker is operating at a large enough scale, and they intend to do some form of customer acquisition online, then they're finding themselves in the situation where they're becoming digital marketing experts. And I mean, I think that's challenging. And the challenge is, like, how do you scale that down, right? So, I mean, it's okay to do that on a national level, but how does that scale down? And of course, the strategies look very different. So I'll kind of say a second thing about that, like, notwithstanding the skill that's required to be able to play in the space.
Yeah.
We also, it's hard to say how it will play out, but it seems to feel like there's a very big divide between kind of local marketing strategy and online strategy.
Yes.
And that seems to create, to me anyways, a very, very kind of sharp line, right? So if you think of it this way, if your customer acquisition strategy is online, then a broker or a company is playing in a very big pond with a lot of competition, right?
Sure.
I mean, like, SEO at the national scale is a really tough nut to crack.
Or even at the provincial scale.
Even at the provincial scale, yeah, exactly. I agree. And if you scale that back down to local, then local seems to be a little bit easier in some ways. I mean, if you're really going for a hyper local strategy, Google makes that easy for you. With the use of map packs and the way that they kind of funnel customers towards a local experience with star ratings and that sort of thing. It seems very well focused to finding businesses near me, that kind of thing. And you think a person can win there. But there's this real challenge about, like, how do you cross that line between, like, local and an online advertising, and those two things and how they come together. And I don't see it being easy. It seems like the selection set in the online space is a very small selection set. From a consumer perspective, if I do a search for auto insurance, I can kind of tell you what I'm going to get, right? At the same time, I'll get a very well curated set of local results. Right? So I guess what I'm highlighting there is just, like, the inherent complexity of trying to manage digital is, I see that as a big challenge. And it doesn't seem to be getting easier. It seems to me like what we're hearing from our broker partners is that Google is pushing updates on a regular basis. That's like really changing the game and making it difficult for them to keep their eye on the prize, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, we all know it's competitive. I mean, the insurance industry on Google, right, is competitive. It's, I think what we've all read the stats. It's like the first or second at any given time, almost, in terms of the money that gets poured into those.
Mhm.
So, that makes it hard, because now all of a sudden you're competing. And I think with that competition, you just have these varying degrees of supply and demand that are changing all the time, right? So this is why, for a lot of organizations that are in a very competitive set, and not to say that, I think there are just degrees of competition within different industries. And when you're in a very competitive sort of set, it just becomes almost a daily, weekly challenge for a marketer. You're
Seems
literally
that
in
way.
there trying to figure out, okay, well, these guys dropped out, and now these guys have come in, and I'm trying to manage against that, and get my Google changed this portion. Now they look at things differently, and it's absolutely, from that search perspective, a big part of the equation, and a lot of energy goes into getting that to perform, and not just pour money down the drain. So
Right. I
for
mean, the idea
sure.
is how do you become seen online? I mean, because if you're not listening well, then you're kind of a big secret, right? You can have
Sure.
the best product and the best value proposition, but I mean, the second part to that, which makes it challenging too, is then what do you catch that with? So what's the experience that a
Mhm.
customer lands into, and can a company retain their attention long enough to walk in the door,
To
so
do
speak,
something with it,
virtually,
yeah.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see those as being really big challenges, and it's interesting to see a lot of small businesses individually try to solve that problem one-on-one. It's very different when you have an off-the-shelf product like a physical good.
Yeah.
Then solutions like Shopify actually work really well. And there's a whole ecosystem of stuff around that can just kind of help a business develop a very world-class presence, right? Even on a small scale, but they're there and they can play. Insurance is a very different game, with the complexity that around the product, and the advice that's needed from a broker to be able to select the product and to shape it, and for that matter, notwithstanding kind of the application process looks like it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all things that haven't been solved for effectively on scale, I would say, like in the insurance industry yet. And,
Jason, sorry.
No, you go,
Jessica.
Robin, but I want to come back to that Shopify
Yeah.
thing when you're done.
Okay. No, so my question was going to be, how much of this do you think is tied to strategy? So, if we're looking at the insurance industry, or maybe any industry where, so much of focus is really on the product, where something like marketing and then digital is something that's comes in a little bit later, and that's not necessarily the skill set of the people within the organization. And suddenly this is something that, in order to survive and to grow, you need to have this certain level of expertise. And you're now thrown with these complex situations, and you're trying to juggle, running a business which is focused on insurance products and services, but needing to be that marketing expert as well. How does that complexity come into the conversations that you're having with your brokers?
well, we see it, like I personally see it clearly, like it's a challenge. I'm not quite sure what else to say about that. I mean, it's front and center. Notwithstanding some of the larger partners, most smaller organizations are kind of in their early days and trying to understand how to develop a meaningful presence online. And I think it's still an open question. It's
You see
for insurance, frankly, like it's like the analogy I was trying to make earlier was like there isn't an obvious solution to kind of fit the gap for insurance, and I think that makes it kind of ripe for disruption. And I don't necessarily mean disruption in a scary way. I mean disruption in like an interesting way.
Yeah.
I think there's still something to be had there.
One of the points you brought up about Shopify made me think of all of the small, I mean, call them brands, that are out there marketing to us online. Since Shopify came around. And I know what you've talked about there is the catch, okay, so I managed to get an eyeball and now what do I do with it? But I think that part of the what do I do with it is actually a content conversation or content strategy conversation. And that, while Shopify sort of handled the ability to transact something online, that in and of itself isn't going to really make me do anything. So what we've seen is really this major increase in all these small, really unknown brands that have put together a product. Maybe it's a shoe, or maybe it's a bag, or maybe it's, I don't know, some, new kind of thing like a tablet or whatever it happens to be. And these are relatively unknown companies that don't have large marketing budgets, but they're able to kind of connect right to an audience. But then through their content, through their really nice, engaging, maybe little video that occurs or a few swipes with nice images that tell that story, then you do click to something that has that continuity. You're getting a sale. Like, I don't know if this has happened to you or anyone else on the podcast, but like I've bought like iPhone cases that were made of wood when I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. And it's $45 or $35. And I have no idea who this company is, but everything is making sense in this experience. Right. And I think that that's an area that tends to, I don't know, it's not talked about enough, the thought of like just having that, what is the right content for the broker? Because that's also got to be, right size for them, and making sure that content is really throughout the process. I realized the other thing that you touched on was that technology gap of, how do you put them through a buying process or some sort of but there's got to be a big gap there in terms of the content and strategy, no?
Absolutely hear that too. The difference I would say though, with respect to like the example you gave is that, and I've done that before too, by the way. And I've bought products from, a company overseas, for example, right? Quite comfortably too, especially if the experience is one that I'm familiar with and trustworthy. The difference I believe is this in that case is that in that situation, you're shopping for a product, right? And I'd say when you're shopping insurance, you're probably transactionally shopping. Like, so in other words, you're probably not shopping for insurance unless you need it. I mean, there's a very few people who might actually be looking ahead, right? Doing some comparison shopping and thinking about their upcoming renewal. But chances are, if they're online shopping for insurance, it's because something's happened. There's an event that's happened. Either they're purchasing a home, they're new mortgage, the renewal's up. Maybe they had a bad experience with another company. The list is long. But the point being is that there's actually a trigger that's happened. So to your point about content, having content that kind of speaks to those needs would seem like the right thing to do.
Well, and I think it goes back to the whole piece of inbound versus outbound or push, right? It's a brand or a demand creation versus a having to be there when you're, like you said, like if somebody's searching for you for something, which is always the place to start, get your marketing foundations and ensure that your ability to show up is, to whatever that means to you, hyperlocal, some provincial level, however you're going to organize that strategy, you don't want to miss out on that. I mean, you want to have that together to the degree that you can capture that demand. But then I think it does shift a little bit to what's your push strategy going to be? And I don't think this is unique to insurance, in fact, in that one of our clients, they're voice over IP. And I don't know if there's anybody out here that doesn't have the ability to make a phone call in their business. They probably all do, and they're probably not necessarily shopping. And if they are shopping, they better show up on Google. But it's moving into that, why would you look at something else kind of conversation? Why should you take the moment to stop? Especially in a B2B. This is when we're talking about B2C. I think it's sometimes easier almost in ways, although I know there's some challenges with insurance, but it's almost easier to make that argument. Whereas if you're a business, if I'm the manager of IT and I get an ad for some voice over IP system, it's like, okay, I could probably save the business 15% here, but like I've got a million things to do. And, I don't care about that right now. Whereas it's like a consumer, you can almost build that business case. Like you should really take a look at this because it's your money going out the door. It's your family. It's your vehicle. But I do think there's something there around, and it might be something for us to talk a little bit about if you see any of this happening, but how do we help brokers push their message in front of their audience to some degree and tell their story, on networks like Instagram or on Facebook or maybe even LinkedIn if it's a business? Are you guys talking about that at all?
No, so not as much of a focus, frankly, like on the projects that we're running, but I have some thoughts about it for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, what that makes me think of is that like you're talking about like multiple levels of marketing, and you're talking about maybe potentially like brand and image marketing at that point too, which is, I think, what you're trying to do there is get your company known and kind of into the selection set. So that when a person is at the point where they're going to make a decision, like they have a need, that you're somehow in the part of that selection set. Research says that the selection set's not very big though. Like
Sure.
Three companies typically is what's in most people's selection set, right? So I mean, it's kind of back to that thing about like the online space too, right? Like how do you crack that nut and get into that?
Like I think of a broker in maybe just outside of Winnipeg or in the area, right? And they would go to the farmers market. This is like, something that they would do, or it's a classic car convention and they would set up a booth.
Yeah.
And they would stand there and they would, hey, well, maybe I have the need, maybe I don't, but I'm in context to the environment. I'm just here and I'm handing out cards and I'm engaging. Yeah. It's kind of like that in the sense that they're not out there Googling, I need classic car insurance, but I'm in a brand mode almost, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's, I heard a really good speaker at a financial services conference 2 years ago from a Jamaican bank of all places. They were brought in to talk about their strategies for managing social media marketing. And she just made the really clever observation that social media platforms are social. And if you look at the way that they're designed around a persona or person, actually. They're fundamentally just around me publishing content to my social network, right, and interacting. So what she was basically, the thesis of her talk was that if companies are going to leverage social media as a tool, it should be very personal.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to watch businesses
do that,
promote themselves on social media and see how many actually don't do that. And the effect it has is it looks a little bit disingenuous, like it looks
sure, yeah.
And then you see companies that do, and those are the companies that they talk about their employees, they talk about their brand, they talk about their values, and they really kind of take what they've really done there is they've developed a persona for the company and presented that through their social media channel, and they're consistent about it. And to your point, that's probably like a digital version of the farmers market that you just talked about. And what it does is it keeps that, it informs and educates the consumer about that company. And again, kind of keeps them top of mind in their selection set. And I mean, if it's a local company that they resonate with too, I think that's almost like a win-win situation in some cases.
Yeah.
I see a lot of that on the front line. And I think that continuity between that message and that brand and that voice all the way through the journey needs to come up to surface, and we need to educate brokers how important that is, because even if you get that piece of the chain right, and then you go and you drive to an e-commerce engine, let's say, and it all falls down on that side, because of budgeting, because we don't have control of the tool. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the reasons why you can't have that break though. The continuity has to stay through, because it's going back to your point about you're not the big brand, right? So everything through to the ad and the landing page and the tool itself, the nurture stream, it's all got to have that top shelf feel all the way through.
But I think that a lot of the emphasis has been on Google and on search and on inbound, and very expensive. And it's hard to compete with the big guys that are direct writing or just hammering their budgets into that lens it's not the same thing. And I think it is important to say when people are shopping, they're shopping in all cases, frankly. I need something. It's a Google search and you've got buying or intent there, obviously. But when you look at the cost differential to start to go out with more of a push conversation, it's drastic. I mean, you can get pennies a video view right now and this is on like very high quality audiences on LinkedIn, and a lot cheaper if you're looking at things like Facebook and Instagram to get that more brand, or that why should you think about us type of message out into the world. So yeah, I think it's almost a spot where the smaller business can compete. There's a content strategy element. There's a really being thoughtful, to your point, on what's the persona, what's the thing you're going to put out there, but you can do it. You can do it without spending an arm and a leg. Now, you won't get the same return on investment necessarily. There needs to be a different thought around how are we measuring that performance. If we really want everyone within a certain audience within my area to know who we are over a year, probably does come down to measuring things like impressions and views, and trying to get those uniques really to a place where we can feel like, hey, we've got 7, 8, 10, 20,000 people that never knew who we were, have watched over 30 seconds of a video of us. And now that gives us a base to do some remarketing or whatever. It's certainly a longer term item. It's not going to be an in the moment ROI. But it's a thing that people don't think a lot about. They just they gravitate towards the quick, not the quick, but something that's more measurable, I guess. If you want to
more
say
immediately measurable, right?
Yeah.
But to Jen's point, the need to have a comprehensive play that's that's executed well across that short term and long term, the transactional and kind of the brand level. Yeah.
It could be a little bit more familiar also, because we're talking about a strategy and then technology together, right? So you need to have the strategy and then figure out what is the best technology to be able to enable that. And while there are definitely challenges with Google, that's a little bit more familiar, and using some of the social is going to be a little bit further out there. And that's probably another gap within the broker network, that this is just another area that's outside of the comfort zone. And so that they're not going there.
Yeah, agreed. One of the things I think about when I think about digital all the time is that there's this tendency to lump all digital stuff into online, like this one broad category. And I think it's it's an oversight, right? As you guys know, because you do this work day in, day out, what digital's done is it's actually just created more channels of engagement. So instead of having to worry about 5 channels, maybe there's 10, right? It's actually just an exponential thing. And I think the same applies to distribution as well. I think that we see that coming in insurance. When we think about the fact that auto manufacturers are getting into the insurance selling business, notwithstanding the insurance underwriting business as well. They think they can create. They're looking at creating potentially what they believe is a better insurance product using their technology. That's not to replace what we have today. That's additive. So what we're looking at a future is where there are many more potential channels for engagement for a customer, and then the same thing from a distribution perspective as well.
Jason, I'd like you to talk a little bit, if you could, in terms of your brokers, and how often you observe where there is a tendency to try to sort of jump over some of the fundamentals. So at least from a marketing perspective, what we notice a lot is, we've got a lot of very, sort of interested and aggressive brokers that are small, and they're basically looking to get to that place where they've got that interaction online. And the fact that in the education process that we need to go through to sort of establish, as you were mentioning there, that sort of platform needs to be there in order to support that performance marketing, if you will. Some of those foundational sort of aspects, the intent, I think, is to have a really properly sort of set up product, but what it appears like is you're stepping very quickly into something that you're really not ready to support.
100% agree. And what I'd say to that is we see it. And we're part of it as well. We've contributed in some ways as well as technologists. But if you think of the number of smaller digital insurance products, if you want to call them that have been put to market over the past 4 or 5 years that have had, modest sales, if at best, right? one of the observations is that, again, that whole platform play, right? So, you know, in many cases, we've seen people focus on the product. So let's get the product online. Well, there's a couple things that have been missed there. First of all, you know, what we've done as an industry is we've taken the traditional product and put it online, and not had much consideration for how it might transact in the digital channel, right?
Yep.
For a consumer. What we've really done is taken the application form that a broker used to fill in and, you know, place that online and basically displace the work from the broker to the customer effectively, and hope that the customer would feel good about doing that, which it doesn't transact well, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's that kind of foundational element. And then the other piece would be, we've seen time and time again, companies putting up products online, but not really understanding how to drive traffic to those products effectively. And again, to your point about content, if they are successful at driving traffic to the product, they drive them to an application form. So this whole conversation that's kind of needed in the middle is missing. Like the customer is going, you know, it's almost too fast. It's almost like it's going from an intent to a transaction without any kind of, there's no sales involved, right? There's no reassurance. There's kind of no guidance. And so, I mean, fortunately, I mean, there are good examples of people developing kind of solid platforms, but I'd say, like, to your point, more often than not, I think we see kind of partially executed plays, right? So you see like a really heavy emphasis on the product, not as much on the marketing piece, right? And then at the expense of, obviously, the performance of the whole play suffers as a result.
Yeah, we see, you know, and I don't know where, I mean, I think I have a couple ideas of why it's taking so long to get that message out there. I think, you know, we've said for years, it's not build it and they will come. It's this concept of just investing in a piece of technology and expecting, you know, whether it's even to an existing customer suite, whether it's a portal, and expecting the day you turn it on, everybody's going to have signed up and know how to use it. And there's no adoption strategy. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I don't know when that conversation will start to change. I don't know if it really originates from leadership and decision-making being so separated from the process and the build, and they're not invested in every step of the way, and it just gets lost in translation. Or maybe you can comment on, you know, if we've certainly been in around this for 6 years, and seems like the same conversation 6 years ago, right? I don't know if you have any ideas on
what's happening there. Yeah. I mean, one of the leaders I communicate with frequently had something to say about that, which I really like, which is we tend to kind of work the experiences from taking our current products and working them out to the world. So in other words, kind of like an inside out. So we take the product that we have and we push it out, right? And all the implications that come with that. Whereas, you know, probably a better approach would be like to do an outside in approach, which is to like work more closely with customers to understand their jobs to be done, what their needs are. So more like the design, you know, the design thinking approach that successful companies like Apple use to develop their products. And it's just that small pivot, right? So it's the difference. Like in insurance, we'll take a product and like, it's about underwriting, and we'll push that product out to the masses. But whereas a company like Apple wouldn't look at it that way. A company like Apple would look at the product and contemplate, well, what's the customer's job to be done? Like, what do they need done? And then we'll try to erase all of the friction that happens between the customer's need and the, you know, the intent to be delivered. And I think that's the twist that's needed. And you know, obviously there are companies in insurance doing that today, but it's a slow change in insurance to kind of have that mindset shift from you know, kind of a more traditional product development view to something that's more modern, like takes in some of the more design thinking principles.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of something we did at the beginning of COVID. We had two companies that I won't mention, but we had, you know, got two campaigns together that were fairly close campaigns back in March 2020. And one of them significantly outperformed the other by so much so that people
like,
had to turn
close in terms of like they were very similar.
Yeah,
in,
there was
in
it was
nature.
nature, but the difference was the product itself was completely innovative. So it was a combination of a very good campaign
Mhm.
and a good service provider behind it. Just kidding. But also the difference was like the product was so it was different. It was just not your traditional insurance product, and it was completely spoke to the audience at the time. And so kind of to your point where the first model was kind of just going online with an application, same old, same old. This one was kind of the same campaign, but totally new product, totally fitting for the time, topical, if you will. And, almost broke their call center, had to turn off the phones in a way. Right. So
Wow.
we often forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
And, Jason, we started talking about the more innovative future type products. And, I'm wondering, looking at this concept instead of saying, looking at the product and pushing it out, as opposed to looking at the audience or looking at the need and then working backwards. Is that some of the way that we're looking at these future products or services? So really shifting the lens around?
Absolutely. That's absolutely the innovation method and mindset. It's very customer centric, and you could almost say like needs centric. Absolutely. It's kind of baked into the DNA of the processes from the ground up.
Well, I mean, I think the last piece I think we wanted to touch on, because I think we've already been at this for a while now. Hey, Cam?
Yeah, guys, I'm going to have to make it quick because I do have a call in a few minutes here.
Yeah, we won't take up too much of your time. Thank you for that. But we wanted to reflect on something around the journey that they're going, that the broker would go through to sort of mature their marketing, let's say. Okay, so we've talked about this before. There's different cohorts that are out there from doing quite well and seeing marketing performance and kind of they're already there, to that middle pack where they're in the storming, norming, whatever you want to call that phase, where they're starting to see things come together, but there's still a lot of room to go for them to feel like they're getting the performance that they want out of their digital. And then the beginners, which Jen touched a little bit on the beginners. And one of the things that we just wanted to explore is, is that if you could sort of just capture roughly from a percentage range perspective, what's the breakdown in your mind in terms of the 3 tiers?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Are you seeing like 70% are kind of well there and well on their way, or, is it a bigger chunk in the middle?
Not like that at all. Yeah. No. Well, so the percentage is deceiving, mind you, because it also has to be tempered by the size of the market, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
right?
They could be bigger. Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, it's hard to put a number to it, Mike.
Yeah. Is it 80-20? Is it still only two?
Would be this. Like, so I think of digital masters as kind of like the top tier. So these are people who, have a world-class experience.
Yeah.
I'd be hard pressed to say that's even 10% of the market.
Okay.
Probably less. What's interesting in the past year is that, like when you said digital, especially pre-COVID, the focus was really about marketing and acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of activity in the past year around service, policy servicing, which is really cool to see. So I'd say like that middle category, if you include policy servicing as like a part of that digital play, then it's really come to life in the past year. There's a lot of companies and brokers especially have taken parts of their services online, so they're not fully integrated to the back office, but they're at least able to catch that request from a customer online and get them started in digital channel. They're able to provide digital documents, for example. So I don't know. I have a hard time putting a number to that though, guys. Like
no, I think that tells us that
my gut tells me it's probably like 30%, 40%.
Yeah.
My gut feel,
Yeah. So there's a lot of room. There's a lot of work to do is what it sounds like in terms of getting everyone where they need to be. Well, listen, Jason, we know you've got to jet, but we really appreciate your time and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Cheers. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye, guys.